don't hit that skip button because I have huge news for you. The Rewind of the Living Dead t shirt lives. It is here. It is available to purchase. Oh, yes, I'm not kidding. We finally got our Rewind of the Living Dead t shirt out, and it's amazing. It is printed by the same company that prints for Cavity Colors and Fright Rags, which, if you're a hardcore horror fan who buys a lot of horror t shirts, I know I do, you know that's the very best and highest quality because we couldn't do anything less for our fans. It's an amazing full color design designed by Jason Ragosta. It's very cool. It features a zombified myself, a zombified Damon, and it looks just like an awesome horror shirt because that's what we want, because we're horror fans too. So we wanted to make a t-shirt that you could really sink your teeth into. Go to rewindofthelivingdead.bigcartel.com. Again, that's rewindofthelivingdead.bigcartel.com to get your t-shirt today. Rewind of the Living Dead is a review show, so spoilers are ahead.
The Exorcist is widely regarded as one of the greatest horror films of all time, not only because of the cinematic masterpiece created by William Peter Blatty and William Friedkin, but also due to the critical acclaim the movie received as the first horror movie to ever receive an Oscar nomination for Best Picture. Over the next 50 years, a series of sequels and prequels followed, including several films and even a short-lived TV series, but none of them seemed to capture the true spirit of the original film. With a chance to revive the franchise, Universal reportedly paid $400 million for the rights to make a new Exorcist film while partnering with Blumhouse to try and create something truly terrifying. Fresh off his work with the new Halloween trilogy, David Gordon Green came on board as the director with plans to make a sequel that would have direct ties to the original film, but ignore everything that came after. The movie follows two young girls who disappear in the woods for 3 days, but when they finally return, something is different about them, and it turns out they didn't come back alone.
Chip.
Wherever those girls went, they brought something back with them.
Chip.
Something's going on with my daughter.
It's happening to my daughter, too.
Is that Catherine's heartbeat?
They're beating in sync.
One girl lives, one girl dies.
You get to choose.
Rated R. Only in theaters October 6th.
In the latest episode of Rewind of the Living Dead, we face down a new demon as we review the 2023 sequel, The Exorcist Believer. Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I'm Patrick Guerra.
And Patrick, this week we are going to get into arguably the biggest horror release maybe of all 2023 in terms of scale and size. Obviously, maybe not, in terms of buzz, we could talk about Talk to Me, which we reviewed earlier this year. But in terms of just size, scale, scope, when you make a legitimate sequel to The Exorcist, it's going to be a very, very big moment in the horror movie industry. And so that's what we're getting into tonight, The Exorcist Believer.
All eyes on The Exorcist Believer. I'm doing the 31 Days of Horror Challenge as best I can. And I posted, because I was at my horror movie the night before this recording was The Exorcist Believer for this podcast, and I put it up on my stories. I show on my Instagram stories every day what I do. And when I posted Exorcist Believer, I got tons of messages from people, and most of those messages were, The Exorcist fucked me up so bad. I'm very curious how this will go. And there's a lot of people out there that are absolutely like The Exorcist has influenced their lives in a very big way, usually in the negative, in that they're scared shitless still of a movie that came out 50 years ago, literally 50 years ago, and here we are tonight talking about its sequel, like its proper sequel, right? We're in the era of the requels, where we sort of take everything that was happening over the last, in the Exorcist case, last 50 years, putting all of the sequels aside and going, let's take the original, forget about everything else, and tell this story right here, right now in the present. And I think overall requels have been met with sort of mixed results, some better than others. I think Scream's requels are doing pretty good. They're not really requels. They kind of just are sequels. They just kind of keep on going. There was the Halloween requel. Well, okay, yeah, that's a storied history on this podcast, and it's the new Halloween sequels have changed Damon forever. I can tell you that because nay a podcast goes by where you don't mention Halloween Ends or David Gordon Green. There's some sort of ire behind it. So this is very loaded, and indeed, David Gordon Green is back at it again. He's here requeling a very beloved horror icon. Now, Damon, honestly, I think we did the original Exorcist review last week, and I think we were both pretty clear that we knew coming in there's no way this movie was going to be The Exorcist. The Exorcist from 1973 is one of the best movies that's ever been made, ever. Top films of all time, horror, otherwise, whatever. So I didn't necessarily go, this better live up to the hype. It doesn't need to do that because it can't. So Damon, take me through your initial, I feel like when we're talking about David Gordon Green, I have to realize that Damon is already set at a certain temperature. Were you able to temper yourself enough to just let it in and see what it was all about?
We're about to review this movie for probably quite a while on this podcast, and just to be fair, everyone out there, we're not getting into spoilers yet. We'll warn you where we're getting into spoilers a little later. Let me give you my quick and dirty Exorcist believer review right now, Pat. I don't want to bury the lead, and we're going to talk about this movie a lot tonight, but let me go ahead and give you this one right up front. Okay, you ready? Are you sitting down? Are you prepared? At least it's better than Halloween Ends. I'll start there.
That's good.
It's a very low bar to set. Let me be honest about that.
It's a low bar, but thank goodness we're above it.
It's a weird one because my relationship towards David Gordon Green changed so dramatically with that one movie. It's funny if you go back and listen to our reviews of Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. Halloween 2018, we both pretty much universally praised. I had one major problem with that movie, and it still bugs me to this day, but overall, I really liked that movie. Halloween Kills, you really didn't like that movie, and I was kind of lukewarm to it. I didn't mind it, I didn't love it, I didn't hate it. I was kind of like very middle of the road, and when I rewatched it, getting ready for Halloween Ends, I was like, this isn't as bad as I remember it being. Like, it wasn't great, but it was like, it was tolerable. Halloween Ends was like the flip for us, where you didn't despise it, and it was like the worst day of my life. It was just so bad.
The worst day of my life.
And it's what's really funny, and I said this to my girlfriend as we were going into The Exorcist Believer tonight, because she knows how much I hate Halloween Ends. I was like, the funny thing is that if you would ask me about David Gordon Green, 4 years ago, I would have said, man, I really look forward to whatever this guy does. But that one movie can really color your opinion on a director. And that goes across the board. Let me be clear about that. If you love a director or you like a director and they make a really bad movie, you do remember that. I mean, that's just, careers have been ruined by one bad movie. That's just the reality. I don't know if it's fair or unfair. I'm not placing judgment. I'm just saying that's the reality of this. We know that from Hollywood history. One really bad movie and you could be done. You may never get another great chance at this. For David Gordon Green, he already had this secured. Before he ever did Halloween Ends, he was already signed on to become the director of Exorcist Believer. And to his credit, are you ready for this? I'm actually giving David Gordon Green credit for something. He actually didn't want to do this. He was actually saying, I wanted to do something other than horror, and it was Jason Blum from Blumhouse who basically convinced him to do The Exorcist, because he's like, well, we got you for Halloween. We'd like you to come back for The Exorcist Believer. He had an idea, and so he rolled with it. But originally, David Gordon Green was going to go off and do something else. I don't know if he was going to do drama or action or what he was going to do, but his original idea was to do something other than horror, and it was Jason Blum who kind of roped him back into this. So I respect the fact that he was going to go do something else and decided to come back to this. Now, getting back to The Exorcist itself, as you said, Patrick, it's I talk about the impossibly low bar to clear with Halloween Ends. The Exorcist has an impossibly high bar that you can't possibly clear. And
Right.
the best analogy I can give to this in film is Silence of the Lambs and then Red Dragon. Now, I'm not talking about Manhunter. We reviewed Manhunter on this show. It was made before Silence of the Lambs, so it's not fair to compare them because it's earlier, different film, different cast. Not really. They weren't really related. They weren't trying to make Manhunter to lead into Silence of the Lambs. Red Dragon was made as a prequel to Silence of the Lambs, specifically because obviously we know Anthony Hopkins was back and all that kind of stuff. Going back in time, Silence of the Lambs is iconic. It won every Oscar. It was one of the greatest films of all time, not just horror films, films of all time. When Red Dragon came out, it had an impossibly high bar to clear, and it didn't. I mean, there's no way it could have lived up to what Jonathan Demme did with Silence of the Lambs. While Brett Ratner is a piece of garbage, when I went back and rewatched that movie more recently, I never hated it. I actually was like, this is pretty good. Like, it's not bad. I rewatched it just recently. It's been replaying on, I think, Showtime this month, and I was like, this isn't that bad. Now, of course, it's not Silence of the Lambs. It's nowhere near as dark, and the material is, but they don't treat it as such. It's a very bright and vibrant movie, which is really odd. Just the color palettes they choose for that movie. Whereas Silence of the Lambs was very drab, very like neutral earth tones in that movie. And Red Dragon is a very bright movie, not to get off subject here, but it's not bad. But you just can't compare it. It's impossible to compare it to that movie because you're setting yourself up for failure. So I did my best going into this to not do that, honestly, because you can't live up to The Exorcist. And I think that impossibly high bar is part of the reason why this is such a difficult franchise to sequel or prequelize, honestly, because that movie is so good. And it's almost like a perfect film, right? Like when you talk about perfect films, how can you possibly go beyond that, right? And to date, they never have done it right. While The Exorcist 3 is a movie that kind of lives fondly in my heart, it still doesn't measure up to the original. Like it's just like it's a decent sequel. The Exorcist Believer, forgets all of the other sequels, and here's the weird part about this movie, Patrick, just being honest. Like, we all know, we're going to get into it in spoilers more, but we all know, of course, that Ellen Burstyn, the original star from The Exorcist, comes back in this film as Chris McNeil, the mother to Reagan, who dealt with the exorcism back in 1973, and she gets brought back in when these two girls are possessed in The Exorcist Believer. But in reality, that's really the only tie to the original film, because this isn't a spoiler. I promise people who listen to this, like, this is a spoiler. It's not. This really isn't a direct sequel to The Exorcist. It's an exorcism movie that Chris McNeil appears in. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
That actually makes total sense what you're saying, and it makes even more sense now. I normally don't do a ton of like, I don't like prepare for these movies. I try to know as little as possible, but I just happened to listen to the Happy Sad Confused podcast with David Gordon Green. Shout out to Josh Horowitz, a buddy of mine who has a great podcast. I just today, before we started recording the podcast, and I learned a little something about David Gordon Green's thought process when given the Exorcist franchise. And you're right. Chris McNeil is a character in this movie, but this movie is not, in his intention, to be a pure Exorcist sequel. He wants it to live in that world. Now, I don't know why that wasn't like made clearer ahead of time. By the way, it doesn't even necessarily need to be. But it might have helped soften the blow for certain people because, truth be told, you and I have gotten really good at like tempering our expectations and understanding after, remake and sequel after sequel, like not to over expect. But there's still a lot of fans out there who think Chris McNeil's here, you know, and for all we know, that in 1973 there were fans from 1973 or even a little bit later in the 80s or whatever, who The Exorcist was their start in horror, and they worship at its altar. So it's like hallowed ground for them, right? It's a sanctum, and so to them it's very precious. David Gordon Green doesn't necessarily hold the original precious. He knows it's a great movie. He said as much. I think he understood the assignment. Like, oh, you're going to give me a sequel to The Exorcist, one of the greatest films ever made. I'm only going to try to disappoint if I try to live up to that movie. Let me just play in that world. And then and I'm sure somewhere along the line in some conversation, I don't know when or don't know how and don't know who, but someone said, you are going to put Chris McNeil and Reagan in this movie, right? And it was maybe even him. Maybe even he said it. But ultimately they went like, how? Because we're just trying to play in the world that The Exorcist exists in, and the idea that possession can take place at this level. And you have sort of a lingua franca that comes from The Exorcist, so you understand, like, okay, a demon like Pazuzu, we don't even know that this is Pazuzu as far as we know, can understand your deepest, darkest secrets and your fears and your sins and the things that that make you feel terrible about yourself. We understand that from that movie. We know kind of that rule set. So how on earth do you make Chris McNeil and Reagan part of this movie and still keep them relevant some way, somehow? Well, I can't get into it. I almost did a spoiler right in here, and it's not too much of a spoiler, so I won't say it yet. But I think David Gordon Green's way in to integrating Chris McNeil into this story was the right choice. But how it played out, I don't know that I would sign off on that 100%. But again, who the fuck am I? I'm just saying, like, I get why he used Chris McNeil the way he used her as a character. But people might butt up against how her character's arc plays out in this movie.
Yeah, it's a really weird one because, again, when you're tying it to the original film, you're immediately setting yourself up for failure in a lot of ways because you are tying it to that original Exorcist from 1973. People are going to have expectations. It's impossible not. I mean, people are going to have expectations just because you call your movie The Exorcist Believer. You know what I mean? Like, immediately people are going to have expectations because you're now sequelizing an iconic movie. And then you bring back Ellen Burstyn at 90. First time, I mean, she's never appeared in any of the other sequels. This is the first time since 1973 she's played this character. So to bring her back all these years later, once again, you're setting the bar impossibly high. Now, I don't know if that. I don't even know if David Gordon Green or Blumhouse or Universal care if they give a crap about any of that. I'm just saying, like, that's the reality of what they're doing. Like it or not, that's what they're doing. And here's where I start running into issues with The Exorcist Believer. And again, I'm not going to get into spoilers, so I want to be on a very broad scope here when I say this. This movie is a very safe Exorcist movie. This movie doesn't take many chances. This movie doesn't shock you. This movie, the best word I can use to describe this movie, Patrick, is it's a very mediocre movie. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's not exceptional. It's just a very mediocre movie. And I'm not even comparing it to the original Exorcist. But if you want me to compare elements, not the movie, just elements. One thing we praised about The Exorcist was the way that it pushed boundaries and took chances. And that's in and we did I put a segment up on our Instagram and my TikTok page saying, you know, with you talking about it, like the scene we all know, the crucifix scene from the original Exorcist, it still boggles our mind 50 years later that they did that in 1973. Now, I'm not saying you should go for shock just for the sake of shock, but when we're talking about a demon possession, which is one of the most terrifying, scary things you can imagine for a person to have to go through in the horror realm, let's say. You have to be willing to push that boundary into areas that we're not comfortable with. Whatever that is. I'm not saying it has to be sexual or any, I'm not going there. I'm not comparing it to the original. But what we loved about the original Exorcist was the way the elements of it pushed boundaries. It made you uncomfortable. Right? And that's what exorcism movies are. One of the reasons I love The Last Exorcism, which is a found footage movie, and I've mentioned it on this, and that movie's PG-13. That movie made me uncomfortable. That's a PG-13 movie. It made me uncomfortable. So I'm not saying you have to go above and beyond and go graphic and go crazy. I'm just saying that you have to push boundaries to make it to where you're cringing in your seat. We talk about a movie on this podcast, The Dark and the Wicked. That movie made me not only terrified, but it made me truly uncomfortable watching.
Mm-hmm.
I was cringing watching that movie in a lot of different places. The Exorcist feels like a very toned down, muted version of what an exorcism film should be. Not an exorcist film, an exorcism film. This felt very safe, very color by numbers, and as I use the word mediocre, it's not terrible. I'm not saying that about this movie. It's not terrible. But it didn't do there was never a moment in this movie when I walked out of the theater, and this was a couple hours ago. I just saw it tonight, like before we did the podcast. When I walked out of the theater, there was nothing I walked out of to where I felt like, ooh, I need to mention this in the podcast. Right. That really made an impact on me. That was like, wow. It didn't have that. And again, it wasn't terrible. And if it popped on cable one night when it pops on HBO or Showtime or Stars or whatever, would I watch it again? Sure, I'd leave it on.
Yeah.
But there was nothing in this movie that stood out to me to where I was like, I can't believe I just saw that. And that to me is the gold standard of that kind of movie. And that, again, I'm not even talking about the original. I'm just talking about this kind of movie. The Pope's Exorcist, Talk to Me, possession movies. Something needs to stand out to me because these movies are meant to jar you. This movie didn't jar me, Patrick.
Well, Damon, on our Exorcist podcast, we asked the question, like, what do we need out of Exorcist Believer, right? And we both agreed right then and there, it doesn't need to live up to the original. We've beat that into the ground now. We're clear about that. What my suggestion at the time was two things. One, shock people. Just shock the shit out of people. Make them stick with this movie. Make this movie stick inside them somehow. They didn't do that. My second thing was end the Reagan Chris McNeil storyline. Did they do that? We'll talk about that in spoiler territory because I think the answer is not even necessarily clear. But I think you're right. And I walked out of this movie going, well, it was a movie. It was there. By the way, and I'll say this, I said it before, even in Halloween Ends. David Gordon Green's a good director. He makes great visual choices. He puts you in you're watching a quality movie with quality acting. And
performances are good. Like performances are good. None of that's a problem. Let me be clear about that. It's not the direction of the movie. I don't mean to cut.
No,
I want to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I went there and I go, this is a high quality movie. Like just kind of everything about it. And I will say this about it right now, because I think we're going to have to move into spoilers sooner than later because the trailer basically sets you up for everything. But David Gordon Green made a story choice this time around, which I got to say, there's aspects of it I really liked, actually really liked. And then there's aspects of it I was like, well, that's just kind of boring, or that's just kind of not going to work. But nothing ever knocked me on my ass. It existed right in the middle. And I came home and my wife goes, so how was it? And I go, it's about a C+ somewhere in there, which for some people, that's a fucking, that's a death sentence for a movie. No, that means it's average. That's what a C+ is. That's an average movie. But I guess when you put the title Exorcist over the top, you expect above average because The Exorcist is what it is. Again, I'm not expecting it to be The Exorcist, but I am expecting it to be an above average movie. That's the only expectation I think I put on this movie at all was do something that will make this movie memorable. And I got to admit, like, and we're going to talk about this in spoilers. We had what I think we're coining right now, the season of possession on Rewind of the Living Dead. We've been talking about possession movies for a couple of months now. And so we're going to compare a couple of different possession movies that we've watched over this possession season. And will The Exorcist Believer rank high on that? Tune in and find out. But a little bit of the problem right now is that it didn't fucking kick me in the nuts, which is what I was waiting for. So is it bad? No. Are there things that got me very interested? Yes. Are there new wrinkles in the Exorcist world that I'm interested in? Yes. But did it make me go, I can't wait to see what happens in the next one? No. Halloween 2018, when that was done, I went, fuck me, bro. Like, what is the next one all about? And then I saw Halloween Kills and I was like, what the fuck? Like, this is weird. Which, by the way, like, Halloween Kills to me is a great horror movie. It's just not like I didn't like the story in Halloween. Like that, the Halloween Kills. That's the thing I butted up against. The story wasn't for me. So yeah, Damon, I don't know. Where do we get into spoilers? Is it spoiler time?
Let me give a little bit of praise for this movie, because I know a lot of people are gonna be like, dude, you are a David Gordon Green hater. You're just hating on me. and I promise you I'm not. Let me talk about what I actually did love about this movie. And I compare this a little bit. Now, I'll say this was a much better movie. We reviewed The Last Voyage of the Demeter a month or so, a couple months ago. And I said, one thing I said about that movie, I said the premise was far better than the execution. The premise of that movie was a good, cool idea. The execution was just bad. It was just not well done. This is a better movie than that. I'm not, again, that sounds like I'm setting like a really low bar to clear.
It's a backhanded compliment.
But once again, I feel like the premise was better than the ultimate execution. What this movie in terms of chronologically, in terms of how the story's set up, it's set up similarly to The Exorcist, where, you know, normal life is happening for these two girls. Something dramatic happens, the possession happens, weird behavior starts, it kind of continues to spiral out of control, and then towards the end of the movie, you get the exorcism. That's not reinventing the wheel, and it's not copying did The Exorcist set the template? Sure, but that's been done in every exorcism movie. I mean, the Conjuring movies are all that. That's the template you follow. The first 40 minutes of this movie, Patrick, and you're going to be shocked out of your mind when I say this, the first 40 minutes of this movie are almost perfect.
I'm not shocked. I agree.
The story, the whole idea of these two girls who come from two very different worlds. One is raised by a single father. Her mother died giving childbirth. The other girl is raised in a Pentecostal household with other children, very religious, super, like, you know, very, very buttoned down family. And the other girl is just her and her dad, and they're like best friends. They've grown up together. He's been her only parent, and they are just like a super tight support system for each other, but they're like best friends. Yes, they are father and daughter, but they're like best friends. And then when this tragedy happens where these girls go missing, which again is in the trailer, there's no spoiler there. They go missing, and when they're found 3 days later, something is off, and that sets up the movie. That's not a quick setup, by the way. That's the first 30 to 40 minutes of this movie. And it's really well done. It's chilling, it's scary, the premise is spot on. And I loved the introduction of how we got there. It's everything after that where things just kind of feel forced and a little rushed and just very... I don't want to, I hate to use like this word when I say this about a movie, Patrick, but just very meh. Like that was just like my reaction, like just very meh. Like, and I think that's the problem. We're getting spoilers in 2 seconds, but I think that's the problem is that the first 40 minutes got me into it. I was way into the story. I was really interested to see where they were going to go. And then everything after that first 40 minutes was utterly predictable. Nothing threw me off. And it was just a little, and then we're going to get into Chris McNeil returning, which, you know, again, this isn't a spoiler, so I'm not telling you what happens. I'm just saying, like, it was just disappointing. It wasn't it wasn't a reason to bring her back. Let me just say that.
I'm gonna add that reminds me that I'm gonna add in one more little category that just strikes something for me. But continue on, Damon.
But yeah, just again, so I want to be clear about what I did like about this movie. The first 40 minutes are great. I was really drawn in. They drew me into the characters, they drew me into the story, they drew me into these girls and what happened to them. And it was pretty harrowing in that first 40 minutes. It's just almost every choice they made after that felt it's like they started I'm making a lot of analogies tonight with my Silence of the Lambs, and now I'm going for ice cream. It's like you start out, it's like the movie, it's like when you go to get like ice cream at a store and you get vanilla ice cream, but then you get stuff on it, right? You get hot fudge, you get sprinkles, you get, cookie crumbles, whatever. You go to, whatever your ice cream shop is. It's almost like the reverse of this movie. You started with like the sundae. You started with the hot fudge and the cookies and the sprinkles, and then they just took pieces away. And by the end of the movie, you're just stuck with plain vanilla ice cream. And you're like, hold on now, didn't I have some hot fudge on this shit earlier? Like, where'd the hot fudge go? Where did the cookies go? Where did the sprinkles go? That's what it was like, the reverse in this movie. The first 40 minutes, like, they're setting it up, man. It's like a pizza with all, I'm food obsessed tonight. It's pizza with all the toppings, and they just kept picking them off as the movie went on. And by the end, you're just stuck with a vanilla ice cream cone and plain cheese pizza. And you're like, what the hell happened? What happened to all my toppings?
On the genre side of that, I agree with you. On the story side, I might disagree a little bit, because I feel like this was a very subversive movie. I'm going to say this before the spoilers in case anybody pauses and then goes to see the movie, knowing that we don't necessarily agree 100%. I feel like we both have the same temperature for the movie, but we might like different things about it. I found parts of the second and third act to be very subversive, and I appreciated what was going on there story-wise. I mean, but I think you're spot on with the genre of it all. The genre of possession, which The Exorcist is the gold standard anyway. For the genre side of it, it did become vanilla. Like, and I was like, wait, we're not going to do like just standard plain cheese pizza easy on the sauce, are we? We did, like on the genre side. And I was like, oh shit. Oh man, but there were this. Okay, before we get into spoilers, I'm going to say this might be my favorite David Gordon Green story since Halloween 2018. I'll say that much, and then we can get into why I think that.
And you know what? I'd probably agree with you there. And that's, I mean, I would agree with that. I would say story wise, yeah, because I didn't bump up against Halloween Kills as much as you did. But the story I bumped up against. That's what you just had a much bigger issue. That was like me with Halloween Ends. But yeah, like I would agree with that. I would say this is probably, again, that's 4 films. It's not like we're setting, a dramatic, like, oh my God, he's had 50 movies and this is number 2. Like, yeah, right, I would agree. Right. I think that's fair to say. So yeah, Pat, let's get into spoilers. We'll get into categories in a second. Let's get into spoilers. So just again, be clear. We are now going to talk about spoilers with Exorcist Believer. So if you haven't seen it, go see it. And then come back and listen to the rest of this episode, or just be forewarned, we are now going to get into spoilers. So Patrick, go ahead and continue your point now that we are completely into spoilers for The Exorcist Believer.
So Damon, we might as well say, okay, we kind of set up that what you see in the trailer is what you get in that first act. 2 girls go missing, they come back and things ain't quite right. Now here's where I think the movie gets, like we're going to go into peaks and valleys throughout this about how we feel about this movie. I feel like when they first come home, things are real interesting, and it had an air of slow burn to it that was almost reminiscent of the original Exorcist, in terms of like, we're just going to sit at home with these people for a little bit. Like, for instance, when Angela is our character. Oh shit! And I don't have her name pulled up. Hold on, I got it. It's so close. Angela, played by Lydia Jewett, and her father, Leslie Odom Jr., who plays Victor. They're all by themselves. She's come home from the hospital. Very dramatic. All that buildup. I think we both agree. Great drama when they get back to the hospital and they're running the battery of tests on these girls to make sure they're okay and that they haven't been hurt and all that stuff. And they ultimately go, we don't know what happened to these kids. They got some scrapes on their feet. They're a little dehydrated, but otherwise, we can't find anything wrong with them. And then when Angela and Victor get home, things are starting to turn, and they turn slowly, but that slow turn is nice. And I go, oh, it's unsettling that something's going wrong here. And it felt very down to earth. There was like a little bit of moment of scares and all that stuff. And then Damon, I feel like, and I'm going to bounce around a little bit, and I want you to kind of help me fill in the gaps. I felt like once we started to understand that it was possession, because we don't do the slow burn like they do in The Exorcist, which is like, now let's figure out why these girls are crazy and do cats. They kind of breeze over that pretty quickly and get into them being possessed. It just goes from like, they were not well to like, whoa, holy shit, we're fucking possessed. Yeah. There was no denial of the call. Like there was no like, I know she acted super weird right there, but I think like there's a way to make sense of that. It just went from like, she's come home, she's doing all right, she's doing okay, to like, holy shit, okay, they're like this is so bad. This is so bad. Yeah. But there was that little. Go ahead.
It went from 10 to 100 in a hurry. Is what I.
Yeah. You were just like, whoa, and it kind of, and like you just kind of understand that we're in to possession, and to give them a little bit of credit there, Victor does have a denial of the call, where he just goes, "Oh, my poor daughter is psychiatrically damaged, and I'm gonna have to put her in an asylum." And I actually like that scene. I thought that was a great scene. He goes and visits the asylum, and it's dreary. It's a bleak ending for what he thinks is going to be his relationship with his daughter, because he doesn't have a way around that. But then like almost immediately to her getting into there, they go fucking full force on the possession side of things. And then you're just way into that possession shit, like hard. And then Damon, and I'll turn this over to you, Damon, but there's different people in the community. There's two separate religious neighbors that Victor has, and there's of course the other girl, Catherine, played by Olivia O'Neill, and her family, like you said, is Pentecostal. They're rather religious. So you got three religious people interconnected with Victor, who is not religious at all. And eventually they go, we need to bring in the big guns here. And the big guns turns out to be Chris MacNeil. Sound familiar? Why, yes, Chris MacNeil from The Exorcist, who, after the events of The Exorcist, decided to write a book about her experiences, Damon. And she becomes what is a very classic archetype in horror that I appreciated. She became the half man, the person who has seen it before and who might be able to help you. Damon, help me. Was the Chris MacNeil character utilized? I do believe Chris was very well utilized as the half man, but was she utilized to satisfaction?
Absolutely not. And that's probably where I really start bumping up against what happened in this movie. Now, let me backtrack for 2 seconds. What you said. They did go from 10 to 100 in a hurry. Like, it was the girls came home from the hospital, and there is a really good creepy scene. It's also in the trailer, so even though we are in spoilers, like where Leslie Odom Jr.'s character, Victor, is standing in the bathroom brushing his teeth, and his daughter just shows up right there, and she's like, did you say something? Really creepy, really off-putting. But then it's just like, from there, it's just like, boom, she's just full. There was no transition in her being possessed. Like, it was just... she went from like kind of creepy to full bore insanity. Same thing with her friend Catherine. It was the same kind of thing. Like with Regan in the original Exorcist, like it was a real slow burn of watching her kind of devolve from one to the like stages of possession. There's no stage of possession. It's like we're kind of creepy acting, and then boom, we're just like in your face, devil. Your mother sucks cocks in hell. There's no transition. It's just boom there. So at one point, we meet this character, Anne, who is played by the great Ann Dowd, who is an actor we adore on this show. We've reviewed a couple of it. She's amazing. She plays the
We
next
love
door
Ann Dowd.
neighbor. Yeah, she plays the next door neighbor to Victor, who is a nurse. And it turns out, conveniently, by the way, that she used to be a nun in training, and she decides not to become a nun. She committed a sin, and she decided not to become a nun, blah, blah, blah. So when everything starts happening to Angela specifically, but also with Catherine, because she's a nurse at the local hospital, so she sees firsthand what these girls are going through, the trauma they're going through after returning from being missing for 3 days with no memory of where they've been or what happened to them. She's the one who says, I read this book in college and it meant a lot to me and I think you should read it. And Victor, who I think we kind of established in this movie, he's an atheist. Like, he doesn't believe in anything. He's not, whatever.
Not a believer.
Not a believer. His wife died in a Haitian earthquake at the start of the movie. That's how everything starts. His wife dies in an earthquake. His daughter lived. His wife died. And he's kind of like, I don't believe in anything. She gives him this book and she says, I think you should read this. It might give you some insight into what's happening to your daughter. Turns out the book is called A Mother's Experience, and it's written by Chris McNeil. It's the book she wrote after what happened to her daughter, Reagan. Became an international bestseller. She was doing all the book tours and news shows and everything, and she became very famous from that book. And so from there, like, things continue to spiral out of control, and then Victor just decides to go drive to Chris McNeil's house in an undisclosed part of wherever they're at. And he just shows up. In her entrance, she just like walks to the door like, hey, what's going on, Victor? How you doing? So your daughter's possessed, huh? Well, let me tell you how this works. It was really just like an odd introduction of Chris McNeil. Like, you want it to be this like grand moment. Like, I don't know. It was like, it just felt very anticlimactic when she returned. Like, she just literally shows up to the glass door and like opens the door and you're just like into it. It's just really odd. Like, it was almost like, I'm not trying to rewrite this, but in my head, what I was thinking immediately when this happened, I was like, wouldn't it have been a little bit cooler if like they called, reached out to her and she's like, I don't want anything to do with this. This already ruined my life. I spoke about it, but I'm done with it. That was 50 years ago. Don't involve me. Don't involve. And then like kind of had that struggle where like she's like she doesn't want to be involved, and then she shows up at the hospital like, I'm here to help.
Right.
Like, oh, she's here. She's here.
Yeah.
I know that's an overdone trope, but it works. I mean, the reason why it's overdone is because it works really well. There was none of that. They show up and she's just like, oh, okay, cool. I'll go there and check out your girls. And then when Chris McNeil goes to check out Catherine, her family's all like, they're all praying and beat up and just like,
they decided to treat her at home with their own prayers. Like, you were like, oh, that's a bad idea. They just thought they could handle it in house. No.
Yeah. But then she shows up there and she's just like, it's the scene from the trailer where she goes in and the demon is taunting her about Reagan and, she's in hell and blah, blah, blah. And then the demon stabs Chris McNeil in the eyes, doesn't kill her, but stabs her in the eyes, and that's pretty much it. That's her involvement in the movie. She's not there for the exorcism. She's not there to like really truly save the girl. She shows up for about 5 minutes to say, oh, I've seen this before. Let me get stabbed in the eyes, and then that's the end of my role. It was the most anticlimactic and, to use a better word here, Patrick, pointless return of a legacy character. Now, you mentioned that David Gordon Green, we don't know where the idea came from that Chris McNeil was going to come back. First off, let me be clear, because as I said earlier, Ellen Burstyn has certainly been approached to come back for these films previously, and she just said no. For whatever reason, she decided to say yes this time. I don't know what the pitch was. I don't know exactly. I know there's an article out there where he talked about how he, convinced her to come back. But reality, was it just money? I mean, did they say, hey, we're going to give you, a huge paycheck to come back? And maybe Ellen at 90 was like, sure, let me just make one big bag and this will be one of my final roles and I could just, be happy with it. I don't know. I have no idea. But they got her back. But the problem is, Patrick, her appearance feels like a real waste. Like, she comes in at the point when the movie starts careening towards the boring, like when it starts like veering towards the mediocre, and her appearance is about 6-7 minutes maybe, and then she's gone again. And she really served no purpose. Like, she didn't really even serve as a bridge. She just shows up and says, "Oh, I know what's happening here." And that's it. That's her only role. And then she gets stabbed in the eyes.
Well, I will agree and disagree. I think it's a twofold thing. I agree. Yeah, she does get stabbed in the eyes, and then you're like, "Who? What are we gonna do with that?" And that was one of my notes. I was like, "That's ballsy," because she just got here. You're gonna stab her in the eyes and incapacitate her. How's that gonna play out? Spoiler alert: it doesn't. It doesn't play out, which was shocking to me. But I will disagree here. She served one more purpose, right? Okay, so she gets stabbed in the eyes and she's incapacitated. She's in a hospital or she's back at home or something like that. And basically she's down for the count. And it kind of makes sense, like actually like on the technical side of things, you go, Ellen Burstyn's 91 years old. She can't just be hanging out on a movie set all day. Although, according to David Gordon Green, she was there longer than asked and was jovial and made the set a genuinely warm place. And you like to hear things like that. But ultimately, you probably just can't have her for like 3 or 4 weeks. That's probably not going to make a lot of sense. So you got to get her in and get her out. The way they got her in and got her out is kind of weird. You're right. There was this weird slow burn of just like, I'm gonna mosey up to your house and talk to you, and I'm a complete stranger, and you're gonna completely buy in immediately. It was weird. That was a weird way in. I agree. But they did use her in one respect, and maybe this was a function of the technical challenge of just keeping someone who's 91 years old for as long as you can keep them. She does her final half-man duty. She explains to Victor that what you're going to need, because she talks about the time that Reagan was excised, and she goes, "I wasn't allowed in that room. They kept me out of that room. I think what you need to save these girls, I think you need everyone. You need as many people as you can get. You need every walk of life that can believe, that cares, that will give a shit to help these girls." That's her final piece of the classic archetypical half man thing, which is, I'm going to give you the key. That's the key to winning. She does do that. So she serves that purpose. It's weird. It's a weird way to do it. But on a technical level, I go, that's kind of what you have to do. You do kind of, she's 91. She might need to just lay down with something over her eyes and go, just go, like, get a bunch of people together and do it, because I'm not going to be doing it.
She does. And I think she does do that. But then again, like, part of my biggest issue with the second half of the movie when we get into the exorcism is that they really, like, they actually are just like inviting every religion into the room to do the exorcism. So there's like a woman who's like a spiritual healer, and then they eventually get a Catholic priest, which, by the way, the Catholic priest is like, I mean, I know, like, any of these exorcisms,
I really want to talk about the Catholic priest part.
Like,
go ahead.
It's just a really meek, weak part. Like, it's a really, like, forgettable person. Like, there's
something I really like. Go ahead, because I really want to bounce off that.
There's no gravitas to this character whatsoever. We meet him like for like 5 minutes, and then he's just there. Like, we know nothing about. There's no background. We don't know anything. He's just a dude. Like, he's just some dude who works at a church, basically. We don't learn anything about him. We don't know his connection. We don't know. And he's not even like a certified exorcist. Like, that's not even his thing. Like, he's not like, it's not like he's, trained in this. He's just like, oh, exorcism? Sure, I could do one of those. And then they also have like a pastor. They have a pastor from Pentecostal. But I'm just like, they're just like bringing in everybody. They're like, let's hit it from all angles. And like, it's just a really odd way to attack this.
Well, but so I got the benefit of that interview that with Josh Horowitz, where David Gordon Green explained, he goes, I don't like to make message movies. He goes, but there was something that was kind of bugging me. And he goes, and that's that people of different backgrounds are kind of fracturing and pushing away from each other and siloing. He goes, I wanted to put in this movie without banging it over your head, that maybe if we all got together and used our strengths, that we could make something happen. And and I'm saying that as I appreciate his choice there, because I did think it was cool. I was like, oh, cool, this like ancestral healer woman, she's going to bring her expertise. And then these Pentecostal guys, well, they're gonna fucking shake their hands and they're gonna speak in tongues and okay, good luck. And Dowd, who you and I love, I go, if you ain't using Ann Dowd, I'm walking. I'm gonna get the fuck out of here because you already kicked Ellen Burstyn out. You better fucking use Ann Dowd. Well, Ann Dowd used her diehard faith. And she goes, I got right to the door becoming a nun. This is my chance at redemption. I can save this girl. I liked all that. Now, here's where I really want to talk about the priest for a second, because I think this was a very great choice. I loved it. You say that the priest was like a throwaway thing, and I think that's a message. Listen, I'm going to get on a quick soapbox here. As a former Catholic, there's a lot of, I don't want to get too deep into it, but there's a lot of dirty shit in the Catholic Church that absolutely is vile. They're a vile organization on a lot of levels. It doesn't mean you're bad if you're a Catholic. It just means that that organization that collects money and doesn't pay taxes, they're kind of shitty. I have a feeling David Gordon Green was like, let's not make them the heroes of this movie. And they almost did. They almost got me. Now tell me if you don't remember this part, right? This very like blank canvas Catholic priest comes up to the house and goes, hey, you guys exercising in there? They're like, yeah, we're doing the exorcism. You coming? They said, I can't. So here's a Bible. Take it, Ann Dowd. There's the Bible. I got to go. Like, yeah. Thanks a lot, Catholics. Again, you've come to our rescue. Thanks a lot. Fucking there's the door. And then later on during the exorcism, Victor comes outside and he sees that the Catholic priest is sitting in that car praying. And he goes, hey, pal, the fight's in there. If you want to come in, just fucking come in. Quit asking for permission. And the exorcism is starting to take a downturn, Damon. It's starting to get bad. It's not working. The girls are dying. It's getting dour. And here, right through the door, comes the Catholic priest with his little fucking white thing on his collar and his holy Bible and his cross, and he's, may the power of Christ compel you, and he starts leading the charge and the prayers, and all of a sudden the fucking girls, and I was going, you fuckers are not going to tell me that this dude, this faceless, nameless fucking Catholic priest is going to come in like Iron Man and save the day. Fuck this movie if that's what they do. Well, the minute he lays hands on those girls, they fucking twist his head off. And go, he's a non-factor. And I loved that. And I don't know if that was Dave Gordon Green making a commentary on Catholicism, but knowing what I know about Catholicism and about how they treat people, I loved that. It was a very subversive move to go like, when is the Catholic Church going to join in? When are they actually going to try and help out and save a couple of young girls? They're not. They're full of shit. Fuck them. And the minute they get involved, they're fucking out. Damon, I loved it. And once that happened, I fucking cheered because I was like, I'm down with that message.
Now, I didn't mind that. The priest getting his head twisted around was actually pretty funny. Like, not funny, like, but like, I was just like, oh, well, okay, we're just going to dispatch this, half-wit priest who just doesn't want to be involved anyways. Like, because here's the problem I had with it, though, is because when he walks in, Ann Dowd is like, oh my, he's here, he's saving us, he's saving us all.
Here's Iron Man.
And here's the thing, and this is where I butted up against the whole idea of where they use Chris McNeil. Like, I know Chris McNeil in the original movie, she wasn't an exorcist. She wasn't in the room when Father Marin and Father Karras performed the exorcism. But you have to imagine that she learned about it afterwards. She wrote this book, all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm not saying she needed to be the savior, but, like, I would have liked if she had been in that room. Now, maybe, because I think my idea, and I'm not, again, trying to rewrite this movie, my idea, because just being honest, Ellen Burstyn is 90 years old. Like, they're talking about this being a trilogy, which we're going to talk about what the future of The Exorcist will be later. If they really are doing a trilogy here, like, I think it would have been better served if you're going to have if you're going to bring Chris McNeil back and you're going to try to use her in some way, let her be Father Marin. Let her go out. Like let her be the like cuz that to me would be the shocking moment. I know for some reason legacy characters dying in horror films now, people are like, "Oh, that's sacrilegious." That's horror movies, people. Like people are still bitching and moaning that Dewey died in Scream. Sorry, spoilers like 4 years after the fact. People still
I am
bitching
mad
and
about that.
people, but I'm saying like that's a horror movie. That's
Yeah.
how you get the impact. That's how you shock people. Is when legacy characters are characters. I mean, listen. Did I want Nancy to die in Nightmare on Elm Street 3? Certainly not. I love Nancy. I didn't want her to die, but it's a shocking moment. To this day, it still hits me when that moment happens in Nightmare on Elm Street 3. That's horror movies. So I think that would have been a bigger impact. Not saying the priest can't even get involved, but I think Chris being involved in that way, and then she, kind of like Father Marin, like she just expires, like she gives her life trying to save these girls. Like, oh shit, like that's how big this is. I think that would have been a little bit more impactful than her getting stabbed in the eyes and they just shove her into a hospital room for the rest of the movie. I don't mind the choice they made with the priest. The problem is when they're doing the kind of color by numbers exorcism, and you got like the spiritual healer, you got the Pentecostals, you got Victor, who doesn't really believe anything. You got Anne is the character, but also Anne Dowd is the actress playing her. She's Catholic, like so she's doing the Catholic thing. She's just not a priest. So you got like this color by numbers, like hitting them from all sides, and the exorcism itself, it never feels like it's really working. I guess
It's not.
They're just the girls are like taunting them, and one girl lives, one girl dies. That's in the trailer, and just like, and then it's just kind of over, and I'm kind of I understand where you're going with the whole Catholicism thing. I'm totally fine with that. But like,
that's an aside, by the way. I don't think it's like a major part of the movie. I just liked it.
But part of like when you watch the original Exorcist, like when they splash her with holy water and she, the floating in the air, it's all like it's building towards the conclusion. Everything that happens builds toward that conclusion when the final moment happens when Father Marin dies. Father Karras basically says, "Take me," jumps out a window and kills himself. It's a very dramatic ending and just a really like kind of a dour yet also hopeful ending because he saves the girl but he dies. This one never escalates. Like it does, but it's just kind of like, okay, when it was over, so here's the big spoiler. Catherine dies, Angela lives. Catherine, she ends up being the one who dies and one girl really does only survive. When it ended, I was kind of like, okay, how the fuck did that just happen? Like, it just happened. Like, there's no escalation. There's no graduation to that moment where you see the demons reacting and you see the girls writhing in pain and they're reading chants or they're hitting them with whatever it is. Like, it's just a weird way to go about an exorcism to where when it actually ends, you're kind of like, that's it? Like, that's how it ends? Like, that's the end of the exorcism? Because there was no real exorcism to me, in my opinion. Like, it doesn't really happen. Like, they kind of read some chants, and the one, like, the Pentecostal dad is freaking out. He's sitting in a corner shaking, and Victor's just like, "Come back to me, baby. Come back to me, baby." And Ann Dowd is, the power of Christ compels you a little bit. And then the priest comes in, gets his neck twisted, and then it's over. Like it was really anticlimactic because it's just like, what did they do? What did they really do to save these girls? It never really. They did this one classic horror movie thing. The one thing I'll kind of critique David Gordon Green a little bit on as a director, as it did the classic flash around faces in the room scene where they flash the spiritual healer and she's shaking. They flash the Pentecostal priest and he's Jesus, and they flash to Ann Dowd. She's got the cross, and then they flash to Victor, "Baby, come back to me." And they flash to somebody else, and then it's over. It was just a really odd choice. Like, it never felt like they actually performed an exorcism. And I know that's a weird critique to have, but it just like, it started and then it just kind of ended. And Catherine's dead and Angela lives and she's okay. But we never really feel like there was like to me, Patrick, it never really felt like they did anything.
Well, I think you're right. They couldn't do anything. And that might be the part that I think it's not really glossed over. I just think that like they didn't emphasize it for, and they sacrificed emphasizing the stakes of this exorcism for like other character parts, like the Chris McNeil part's a big one, and Dowd gets a lot of time. They give a lot of time to these characters. But the truth be told, and it's in the trailer, so this isn't even a spoiler, is that the true stakes of this movie are that whatever demon has gotten a hold of these two girls is even more wicked than Pazuzu was. I don't even think it's Pazuzu. I'm pretty sure it's not. This demon is saying, I got him, and there's a little trick here. You're going to have to choose which one lives or dies, and there's no way out of that. Or they both die. You pick. It's a great premise. It's a great idea. It got drowned out by everything else. Because truth be told is that was always what was going to happen. One of these girls was going to die. Nothing that they could do was going to fix it. Someone had to make a choice. And then everyone kind of locked hands and were like, we're not going to make the choice, except for the dad, right? The dad is sitting in the back, pissing himself. And it makes sense because his daughter's out there being excised and it's not going well. And he finally can't take it. And I understood the dad in that moment where he just rushes up and goes, I choose Catherine, save her. All the demon was waiting for was someone in that room to make the choice or kill the kids. That's good. That's good shit. But it got drowned out by everybody else's shit. If we could have boiled this down a little bit somehow, and you know, I'm not paid to write these movies, but if you'd boil it down to make it clear to this group that this is what's on the line, and there is no amount of prayer, there is no amount of faith, there's no amount of belief and love in your daughter that's going to fix this problem. You're in a problem that has a terrible ending no matter how we slice it. They don't really emphasize that as strongly as they could have because they got a good idea there. Imagine if that was just the whole setup of this movie. Imagine if you shaved everything else away, you got Chris McNeil's out, you just got into a situation where the demon's inside these girls and just says, tonight, one of these girls will die and one will live. There's no other way. And the whole movie is them trying to go, there's got to be a way to save these girls. And in the end, no. Strong movie. That's a strong idea. Very strong. And in the end, the sin is that the father decided to choose. That's the ultimate sin. Right. And so he pays for it. He pays for it by choosing his daughter. The demon kills his daughter. And it's actually kind of a cool scene. I would say cool, but like they show her being dragged to hell. She is going to live for eternity in hell with demons. It's pretty heavy. Imagine if that element of the movie was deeply emphasized. Everybody'd be talking about this movie being one of the big ones of the year. There would not be a kind of a middle or a meh when it comes to this movie. People would be like, this movie is fucked up because it presents this choice to these people, this impossible choice. And that ties right back around to Victor, who had to make a choice at the cold open of the movie when his wife was dying and the doctor said, you choose between saving her life or saving your unborn daughter's life. And the twist was that he chose to save his wife's life, but it didn't matter. She died anyway and the baby was born. That's sort of the tie around for him. That's the full circle moment for him. But yeah, Damon, I think that's the mistake of this movie is that what they had was a dynamite premise, which is someone will die tonight or both will die tonight or will evil die tonight. Shit, I don't know. Let's fuck around on all systems and see what happens. But they didn't emphasize this hard enough because they were juggling a lot of storylines.
Well, and they also, in my opinion, I think they failed because I think while the character development for Victor and Angela, the father and daughter, was really strong. They also kind of felt in character development to where you really didn't get to know Catherine, and you knew her family were pretty hardcore religious Pentecostal
Yeah.
people, but you don't really know much else about them. You don't really learn much else about them. You don't really learn anything really about Catherine. You spend far more time with Angela. So in the end, when Angela survives, you're kind of like, okay, well, I kind of saw that coming because she's really the lead character. Like her and her father are the lead characters. And the way it was built into the movie, the way it was set up is that they're both like they should be major characters. So when Catherine dies, well, the choice being her father decides, I choose my daughter, and he's the one who makes a choice. You're like, oh shit, he actually chose what the demon wanted, and then the demon's like, ha ha ha, I'm killing your daughter anyways. That's all, well and good, but it's also a little predictable because we didn't really get to know Catherine that well. We just knew that like a little bit about her, a little bit about her family. We knew they were kind of fanatical, but that's really it. And it felt too easy. And just like the exorcism, it never felt serious in that moment. Like you said, as I keep saying, the premise was better than the execution. The premise of we got two possessed girls and only one of them is going to survive. Evil dies tonight. No, I'm joking. Only one survives. We're going to have to choose one. And that's, as you said, that's very dark because these girls are, 12, 13 years old. It's very dark. Just like we talked about everything with Reagan and other movies like The Exorcist. It's really dark when you involve children like that. And that's a dark premise when you're basically like, one of these girls is going to die right here, right now, tonight. That's very dark. But the way they did it just felt unearned. It just felt anticlimactic. It's just like one of these girls dies, the father chooses, and then the girl dies, and you're like, well, that's supposed to be. But there was no escalation. There was no, as I said, that there's no exorcism really. Like they just are yelling and they're kind of like spinning in circles, and then the girls are not possessed anymore. It's a really weird choice, and even in the I promise you I'm not trying to compare it to the original, but like part of what made the original so well done was that the exorcism didn't work.
Right.
It didn't. The Father Merrin died and Father Karras had to take the demon into himself and kill himself. It never actually worked. Like, did he save Reagan? Yes, but the exorcism didn't do shit. But you saw the graduation of you saw the escalation of the exorcism. There was just none of this here. And then at one point, like I said, the demon's like, one girl lives, one girl dies, you choose. Oh, shit, that sounds pretty serious. And then it's just kind of over. And it's just, again, the setup was just far better than the execution. And nothing felt risky. Nothing felt shocking. Nothing felt like, man, I was terrified for these girls. No, I was just like, all right, yeah, we kind of see where this is going. And then when the father came in and said, I choose Catherine, I'm like, all right, Catherine's dying. I can see it. I can see it coming right now. Like, she's not making it. That's what the demon wants. He wants you to choose because then he's going to be like, oh, you choose? I'm going to kill your daughter. And it was just, there was just, I don't know. It's just, there were a lot of predictable choices made in this movie. And then the story itself of the exorcism just felt really weak and very, it's almost like they couldn't choose a direction. Like, I agree with you. Like the kind of the funny part with the priest, and he comes in as the big savior and he just dies like 2 seconds later. In a weird way, I was like, okay, I appreciate that, but we still don't really know. And maybe maybe they're using that as a setup for a potential sequel. I know they said they're talking about doing this as a trilogy. Maybe that's what they're showing, is that the girl really wasn't saved. Like, the demon is still inside Angela, and that's what we're going to find out in the sequel. And if that's the case, okay, fine. But what I like about these movies is, like, you can still see it as its own standalone film and appreciate it for what it is. And if that's the dangling thread that you're leaving out there, that Angela wasn't really saved, it didn't come across in the movie. It just didn't work. Like, she's just okay, and life goes on, and that's it. And we don't get any hint that, like, maybe she has like even though it was really poorly done, like the nun showed at the end of the nun, the dude had the backwards upside down cross on his neck. We're like, oh, he's possessed.
Right.
There was no indication she's still possessed. That's my guess, is that they're going to do it like that. Like she was never not possessed. She just, the demon hid inside her and he's going to come back out to play in the sequel, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, it was just like, it just felt unearned. It just felt oh, we're here. Exorcism. I love you. I love you. I love you. I choose Catherine. She's dead. Oh, it's over. That was the exorcism. Yeah. I didn't understand any of it. It was just kind of like there and over and didn't feel powerful. They had the girls hooked up to heart monitors. They had that dramatic scene in the trailer where they're like, their hearts are beating in sync. Great. What did that mean? Nothing. Meant nothing. Meant nothing.
Right. Imagine if you'd have taken, and maybe this was a thought at one point, but just take Chris McNeil's story out of this. Take it out. Trim down Ann Dowd's story. I love her, but trim down Ann Dowd's story. Trim down as much as you can to this movie and get to it. If you're gonna go guns blazing into the possession part, then get right into that exorcism and try and figure that shit out as quickly as possible. Just use Ann Dowd instead of the Chris McNeil character, and you save about 15-20 minutes of this movie, and you get into the Sophie's Choice of it all, and just have that movie be the center of it all. And I think this would have landed stronger on its own. But I think, and I don't know, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming David Gordon Green necessarily. It could be Jason Blum. It could be the powers that be at the studios. But just needing to have the backstory of Chris McNeil in there slows this thing down. It slowed it down a lot. We could have spent more time with Catherine and her family. We could have really gotten to know both of these families and knew what was on the line. It's easy enough on the surface to understand it's two kids' lives on the line. That's easy enough. But like to invest ourselves in it and get into it, they miss that.
You either need to go one way or the other. You either need to lean into the Chris McNeil of it all and make her a major character and have her play a role in the exorcism and the entire ordeal and how she's tied into this, or don't have her at all. That's kind of my thing. I'm with you. Like, if you're going to have her, make her have a purpose. Make her be, like I said, my version of the character where she doesn't want to get involved, and shows up to try to help save the day. And maybe she still dies. Like, that would be like a dramatic, like she showed up to help out, and she still ends up Father Marin, where she dies in the end or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that. Or if you're insisting on it being a tie to the original, then as cheesy as it sounds, and I'm glad they didn't make this choice, Patrick. I'm just saying, if you're going to go full bore into that, then it's Reagan's daughter who's possessed or some. I know that's cheesy, and I'm glad they didn't go there. But I'm saying, like, if you're going to go, if you're going to lean that hard into the sequel aspect, then just go all the way. Or, as you said, don't do it. Because, like, Chris McNeil's character, I was glad she came. And my favorite moment, and I know people are going to be like, well, yeah, you're just comparing it to the original. But my favorite moment, one of the biggest parts of this movie we learn about Chris McNeil, is that she's estranged from Reagan. She wrote this book about her daughter, and Reagan hated it, that she was her life was put on display for the world, this ordeal she went through. And so she's estranged from her daughter, Reagan. And at the very end of the movie, Chris McNeil's in the hospital getting treated. Her eyes are covered because her eyes got gouged out by a crucifix by one of the kids. And someone comes in and holds her hand, and she thinks that she's like, Victor? And she says, no, it's me, Mom. And it's Reagan. It's obviously, Reagan came back. Yeah. And you're like, oh, it's a very sweet moment. And it's like, oh, they brought her back. Because we actually questioned when we saw the original trailer and they had Reagan written on the bed. And like, they leaned very hard into making this tied to the original film. And then you get to the film itself, and it really doesn't tie to the original film.
No.
And then you're kind of like, why were they here? And then Reagan showing up at the end is like, oh, I'm glad they had such it was a cool moment. I was so happy to see her back. It was really, really cool. Linda Blair coming back even for 2 seconds was awesome. I loved it. It was my favorite moment of the movie because they kept selling it as a sequel. But it's not. It would be like advertising 2018's Halloween, and here's Laurie Strode, here's Jamie Lee Curtis throughout the entire film. And then you give us Halloween Ends, which is exactly Halloween Ends in storyline is that. Like, they show it, like, Laurie Strode is such a secondary character in Halloween Ends that you're like, why is she in this movie? Like, she doesn't really play a major part in this movie. And they kind of do it here as well, where it's like Chris McNeil's here. she's a legacy character. And yeah, you mentioned she kind of served that purpose of like the advice or like, how to get to that step or
Yeah.
whatever. But really, she does. I mean, you could have done that with anybody. You didn't need her to do it. It could have been Ann Dowd's character who did that. Like, she served that
Yeah.
purpose. So if you're not going to do that, don't include her, is what I'm saying. Like, I'm glad she's back. I was happy to see Ellen Burstyn. And that moment with Linda Blair was my favorite moment. Just as an Exorcist fan, I was like, oh, that was so cool to see them hold hands and reunite at the end of this movie. But if you're not going to make that part of the story, why is she there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, we got a category that I think I can delve deeper into story stuff. But you want to? I mean, I think it's category time, don't you, Damon?
It is. Yeah, it's category time. Let's kick things off as we do each and every week here on the show and talk about best performance. And again, for all my criticisms about the second half of this film, directorial wise, in terms of like David Gordon Green, this film is very well shot and for the most part very well acted. I do, sadly, I do bump up against a little bit of the child acting in this movie. The two girls who got
A
possessed,
little bit.
a little bit of, a little bit of not great moments in there, a little bit, but again, not terrible. But Patrick,
Yeah.
who was your best performance in Exorcist Believer?
My favorite performance of this movie goes to Leslie Odom Jr. as Victor. And it should come as no surprise. Like you said, everybody in here acted very well. So it just was a matter of whose story were we really focusing on. Truth be told, this is Victor's story. And Leslie Odom Jr. plays this father who, as we said in the cold open, had to make a terrible choice. He made this choice to either save his wife or save his daughter. Now, right when the doctors put that incredible choice on his shoulders, they cut away to 13 years later. And you just go, oh, so he chose his daughter because there she is. He's picking her up from school. Got it. Well, what you learn late in the movie is that no, indeed, the demon knows that the choice he made way back when was to save his wife, not his daughter. So the demon is able to taunt him and go, you never wanted this girl, did you? You wanted the wife. You didn't want the daughter. We know that. I know that deep dark secret about you, but you have her, don't you? Like you never wanted her, let her go. It's part of that. It's good. It's a good element of story. I liked it. Even though I was like, oh, this is dangerously like, was this fate all along? And it wasn't really, but we just know that the demons can look into your deepest, darkest secrets. So I was like, cool, I like it. But Leslie Odom Jr. plays this father so well. And you see that he deeply loves his daughter. And you mentioned they're best friends. They do everything together. And when she goes missing, the everything that he goes through there is convincing and great. And he carries this movie. It's his movie. I argue that there's nobody in this movie the camera's more focused on than Leslie Odom Jr. And he does it. He delivers what he was there to do.
He's incredible. I'm a big fan of Leslie Odom Jr. Everything he's done, I'm a big fan of his, and I really like what he did in this movie. And he really is the lead in every shape, form, and fashion. Which I think, in some ways harms, not like it's his fault by any means. I'm saying like the way they focus so much on him, you don't get enough time to really
care. It's weighted on him.
Yeah. So you don't really learn that much about Catherine or her family, which you're supposed to care about these two girls. That was the premise and the kind of like the cool twist of this movie is two girls getting possessed. But by the end of the movie, you're really caring about Angela, and you don't really know that much or seem to care that much about Catherine. And it's not because she's a bad character. You just don't know anything about her. Or her family. You just know they're kind of like preachy, Bible thumpers. You don't really know anything else about them. But his performance is spot on. He's really good in this movie, and I almost just went ahead and kind of went against our normal edict where I try to pick somebody else, and I almost just went Leslie Odom Jr. because it's his movie. He's really that good. But I did decide to go ahead and pick a different person for my best performance because I want to talk. We'll talk about favorite character in a second, but. For best performance, the other side of this, which, I mean, I just have to give flowers where flowers are due, and I always have to give flowers to Ann Dowd. Ann Dowd is so good in everything she does. Even though I agree with you, you could have lessened her part a little bit and maybe given it to maybe given it to Catherine's family a little bit, or maybe had her involved in that way. But Ann Dowd is so good. She really sets the gravity of this situation. She recognizes it right away for what it is. She's the
Yeah.
one that believes that something more is going on with these girls, which is interesting. And it's also a nice twist that she was a nun in training who then drops out of it and becomes a nurse. So she kind of follows both sides of the coin. She's got the religious side, but she's also a woman of science in a way. She's a woman of medicine. Like, she understands. So we kind of use Ann Dowd as like the conduit, whereas in the original Exorcist, like, they had Reagan going through all these awful medical tests, which you and I were horrified by, and then
Yeah.
eventually they visit the priest, and it's kind of like they get two sides of that coin. Ann Dowd's character kind of serves as both sides of the coin because she is like a legitimate nurse, but she's also a very religious person. So I really like that about her, and her performance is great. She's strong in everything she does. And listen, if Ann Dowd's in your movie, she's going to make it better.
And Ann Dowd was my favorite character in the movie. I really did love Anne, played by the great Ann Dowd. I knew that coming in. I'm biased. I love her, but also because she performs. Like, she's just that good. You know, when you get her, she's going to do well. And she took her character very seriously, very heartfelt. I felt like that she reminded me of women that from the Catholic church that I went to when I was a kid. She's a dynamite actor, and she delivers on all fronts in this movie. And, you know, maybe you could shave away a lot of the other characters. I know David Gordon Green wanted this idea of like the community coalescing to make something happen. But if you could have condensed all those characters into Ann Dowd, which, believe me, she can carry the weight. She's strong like that, and made her, you know, made her that kind of central spiritual and scientific healer in the group. You could have had more room for Catherine's family and more room for the weight of the terrible choices they were going to have to make.
So my flip flop to this, and we didn't plan this, by the way, Patrick. I want to be clear about this. My favorite character in the movie was Victor. I thought that character, he was my favorite part of the movie, and not just because Leslie Odom Jr.'s performance. I'm saying like the character itself, because he was
Yeah.
very much like he's a non-believer, which I can relate to. But also, he's a very caring father, and when you're a devoted father, like, you kind of drop all preconceived notions about what you believe in. You're just there to save your child. And you really felt that with Victor in this movie. Like, he didn't give a
Yeah.
damn whether it was Catholics or voodoo or, whatever religion had something to say to save his daughter. He didn't give a shit. He wanted to save his daughter. He was willing to do anything for it. But even he, in that moment when the demon said, choose, one of the girls is going to die, even he didn't go that far. When Catherine's father basically is like, fuck it, save my girl. And then the demon's like, ha ha ha, you're fooled. Victor's a very strong-willed character, and he is the center of this movie. And I liked the choices he made in this movie. I liked his portrayal in this movie. If I want to compliment the writing and the directing in this movie, it's David Gordon Green, and the script is that they did put a lot of effort into really fleshing out Victor as a character, and that worked really, really well. Victor is the best part of this movie, and like you and I talk about this all the time, and I know this goes into story more than just character, but when characters make really dumb choices and we're kind of like, why would you do that? Like, Bumbo. And I understand it's kind of like a staple of horror movies for characters to make bad, stupid decisions. But like, sometimes they're so mind-numbingly dumb where we're like, oh, really? Like, come on. Like, you would not have done that. No person in their right mind would have done that. Victor doesn't make any bad choices here. Like, he does everything he should do as a father. And yet these things keep happening to his daughter, and that's like the cause and effect of it all. And I really appreciate that about his character.
The best part about any horror movie, when a horror movie does dread well and horror well, it's when characters make the right choice and it still doesn't go their way. That's good horror. And this is another credit. This is another good thing to say about this movie. All the characters across the board make choices that made sense. Everything that they were doing, besides the kids, the kids went off to have a little seance to try and. I understood that they were going off to have a seance to try to channel Angela's mother. She wants to know her mother that she never knew. That's about the dumbest choice in this whole movie. But for a couple of 13-year-old girls, it's not a crazy choice. You go, oh, I even understood it. So this is one of those movies where characters don't make outlandishly stupid choices just because that's what we do in horror. This movie doesn't do that. And Victor's character is like a prime example of that.
And you can kind of see her choice in doing that. It seems like is because her mother, Victor doesn't really talk much about her mother, and I think part of it is the guilt he feels over choosing her over his daughter. And so when that
Right.
big secret's revealed later in the movie, you kind of realize that her mother was kind of like, it wasn't like they didn't talk about her, but like you could kind of tell Victor shied away from it, and now you understand at the end of the movie why. Because he always had this intense guilt because he said save my wife. They still couldn't save her, and then his daughter was born. It's like all these years later, 13 years later, he still feels that internal guilt, and you do see that in this movie. And so even that choice makes sense, like in that moment.
This movie gets an A+ for choices. I will say that. Like that's a strong, actually, a very strong part of this movie.
Yeah. Let's talk about best scare. I don't want to spoil the last category in this movie, Patrick, but I didn't find The Exorcist Believer all that scary. There weren't a lot of like truly dark, terrifying moments, but there were a couple. So, what was your best scare in The Exorcist Believer?
In the early parts of this movie, I really felt like they were teeing it up, like especially right when they got back from being missing, and there was like a person in the background, like you could kind of see them hover, and you were like, oh, what's that all about? And then it kind of goes away. It's weird. But there was one classic little jump scare that got me, and when they're on the search for the girls, Victor is down in the trench or this little weird basement or whatever he found in the woods, and he lifts up a rock and a snake jumps out. I fucking jolted out of my fucking seat, like like I'm serious. I just was like, oh shit, like it just got me. It was just a classic jump scare, and there's a couple of little jump scares in the movie that they put in there for an otherwise movie that I think you would more classify as a drama. Which, by the way, the original Exorcist, for the most part, I would also classify as a drama with a lot of dread in it. So they share that in common.
Yeah, I would say my bet that was definitely going. That my girlfriend about jumped out of her seat when that snake jumped out.
Snake.
Yeah, for me, it was the other jump scare in this movie, and that's after Angela returns home after she, pops back up again 3 days later. She goes home with her dad, and she's acting weird around the house, very strange behavior, and then she grabs him with the scarf from her mother and puts it around his face and like chucks him to the ground. And it's really kind of jarring in that moment because she just like wraps it around his face and throws him. You're like, oh shit. Another jump scare. Now, let me add real quick a criticism of this movie, Patrick. I don't really think of these movies for jump scares. I think of these movies for like dread and part of what,
Right.
again, possession movies. Part of what makes possession movies scary is just the feeling of like, this is going to end badly.
Right.
This is going badly. I just rewatched, I like not comparing it to the 2 days ago, before I watched this movie, I rewatched Talk to Me for the third time. I bought it on 4K and I wanted to watch it again. My girlfriend had never seen it, so I wanted her to see it. And one of the things I appreciate about that movie is that it's not like traditionally scary, like in the jump scare, kind of like, edge of your seat, just whatever. But there are so many dark moments in that movie where you really fear for a character.
Yes.
And you're like, I fear for this character. That to me is a different level of scary. That is kind of where The Exorcist Believer kind of comes up short. I never really, even though there's two girls possessed, they're literally telling us one of them are going to die. I was kind of like, I never really felt that genuine dread, that genuine fear. And that to me, Patrick, is a shortcoming. When you don't do that with this kind of movie, you miss something because I didn't really feel that. I didn't have that, like, that pit at the bottom of my stomach, like something bad's about to happen. I saw everything coming and nothing really surprised me, nothing really shocked me. And so when it ended the way it ended, I was like, all right, I kind of saw that coming. And that's not what you want from a movie like this. You want a person to feel like, oh God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? This person, I fear for them. And maybe they die, maybe they live, maybe something terrible happens, but you're just like on the edge of your seat, like feeling for them. I didn't really have that for this movie.
Yeah, you did. There was a sense of predictability there where I was like, oh, I think I know what's going to happen. And pretty much everything did happen that I thought was going to happen. So there wasn't that kind of subversion that I was looking for.
Yeah. So let's talk real quick about, we kind of did this with, what do we want out of The Exorcist Believer during our Exorcist episode. This time around, let's talk about what's next for The Exorcist. Of course, we've all heard the rumors. We all know the story. They've already talked about doing 2 more of these films. This was set up as a trilogy. Now, to be fair, every planned trilogy is based around success or failure of a movie. If this movie bombs, there might not be a second film. If this movie does really, really well, they'll probably order a sequel. So, Patrick, what do we want in the future of The Exorcist following this film?
Well, I think David Gordon Green said in so few words that actually a trilogy is very dependent on the success of this. And by the way, I'm going to say this to everybody right now: go see the movie if you haven't seen it. Get into the theater and support your local horror, because listen, we want more of it. Even if I don't love the next 2 Exorcist movies, I want them to happen. I want to see these movies unfold. What I think is next for The Exorcist, I think, is set up here in a very David Gordon Green way. And take that for good and for bad. And it's something I predicted a little bit in our Exorcist when we were talking about what are we going to expect out of Believer. And that is the fallout from the choice. And he sets up this movie and it very much felt like sort of I would say the end of either Halloween Ends or Halloween Kills, where you realize like the town is going to be very affected by the death of Catherine. This movie does set up that there was already, like, they were very unfamiliar, the families. Victor and Catherine's family didn't know each other. They didn't know their daughters were friends. They didn't particularly like each other when they met, and during this tumultuous time, they didn't particularly get along. He and his daughter were rather insulated by design. And then this event happens and people die. Multiple people die, not just Catherine, but a priest dies. This former star from the 1970s who believes in exorcism, well, her eyes were gouged out. That's weird. A lot of things happened. And I feel like the ending of this movie sort of shows, and it does show indeed, that maybe the parents of Catherine got divorced and are fractured because of the choice that happened. And they see that Angela's back in school, looking and feeling rather alone, looking across at the empty chair where her friend used to sit. I think that what we're rolling into is the fallout from that choice. And I think that is going to influence the next movie, and David Gordon Green is an admitted contrarian. So you go, well, the second one has to be some other kind of possession, right? I think he's going to go, wrong. That's not how David Gordon Green plays in the sandbox. It's not going to be about a possession in the second one. The second one is going to be about the fallout, and it's going to be about evil permeating into the town. That's my prediction. And then 3 will be the wrap up of however he likes to wrap things up. Questionable how he likes to wrap things up. I think that's how this is going to play out.
So if the movie happens the way you think it's going to happen, then I'm going to go ahead and say right now it's going to be Halloween Ends all over again, where you're just going to piss people off. Because if you go into an Exorcist movie, and there's no exorcism, there's no possession, you're just going to piss people off, just like you did when you made a movie about Michael Myers. You said, oh, here's a spoiler, Michael Myers is barely in your movie. So that's first off. I think I think where this is set up to go is that Angela was never truly saved. I think that is going to be the key into the next movie. Is that, yes, I do believe you're right that the choices that were made are going to continue to come back to haunt them. That, the father chose Catherine and Catherine died, and so we might actually get more character development in those characters in the second film. But I think what we're ultimately going to learn is that Angela never really got rid of the demon. The demon is still inside of Angela. I think that's going to be the way into the second movie. The disappointment here is that, again, they didn't need Chris McNeil. They didn't need Reagan. Truthfully, they didn't. For what they did in this movie, they didn't need either one of them. really. I know you said the half man, and I understand, but again, anybody could have done that. You didn't
Yeah,
really.
and Dowd could have done it.
Yeah, you didn't need Chris McNeil to do that, but you've opened that door now. So now, if you're going to open that door and you're because again, they serve no real purpose. So either if this next film you just don't bring them back, it's going to be odd because now people are going to kind of expect it. We saw Linda Blair at the end of the movie. How are you not going to have her involved some way? Because you've now opened that door. Like it or not, you opened that door, and people who are going to see this movie are going to be like, "Why were they there?" That's one of my biggest criticisms of the movie. And I agree with you, like, don't have them. But if you're gonna have them, at least have them involved. And they really didn't. So make that transition. If you're gonna bring them back, make them matter, whether that's bringing Belinda Blair in as the character, like maybe by the second film, like they're like, she now has come back and she's actually accepting what happened to her and she's trying to help people in that role. Okay, then maybe she becomes that character in the second one. But I think the easy path in is going to be Angela was never truly, because again, one of my biggest problems with this movie is the exorcism never really happens. Like they're just kind of like, come back to us, baby, and then she's there. And they're like, what the, okay. I think that's the way in, is that they're going to say she was never truly exorcised, and now shit is really going to hit the fan because the demon has now been living inside of her for 2 years or 4 years or whatever period in the future that we're going to go into, and that she's really messed up at that point. That's my guess. And here's the other thing I would say. I know I keep banging this drum, Patrick, and I don't want to keep doing this, but I want to close out on this with this segment. If you're going to bring back Chris McNeil and Reagan, make them part of the story. And if you're going to make them part of the story, help them transition into the new characters and the new part of the story.
Yeah.
Even though I stand by this, I have said I liked Scream 6 better than Scream 5. And part of the reason I really enjoyed Scream 6, no spoilers here, Neve Campbell, as we all know, wasn't involved. Now, to be clear, pay Neve Campbell. I hope she comes back for Scream 7. Be clear about that. But I've always said at some point, you have to start moving beyond that one character if you're going to continue to do this franchise. Neve Campbell just celebrated, by the way, she doesn't look it by any stretch of the imagination. She just turned 50. Okay? She's no longer the teenager who had a killer boyfriend when she was a senior in high school or junior in high school, whatever year she was supposed to be, the senior in high school. She's grown far beyond that role of what she once was. And what I liked about Scream 6, even though I disagree with how it happened because I think Neve Campbell should have been paid, part of what I loved about that movie is they moved beyond the same tie and same. It's always going back to the original, always tied back to the original, always tied back to Sidney Prescott, always tied back. Now,
right.
Can it be done well? Sure, it can be done well. They did it multiple times. But they eventually had to move on. And part 6, because of necessity, when Neve Campbell didn't return, they had to come up with an idea to move on. And they did it. And I think they did it really well. And the franchise moved beyond that. Now, if they bring her back, there's a creative way to do that. But they've now figured out a way to move beyond Sidney Prescott in those Scream movies. If you're going to bring back Chris McNeil and Reagan McNeil, make them part of the story and then allow them to transition on to where the second film doesn't need them. The second film doesn't need them, Patrick, because they didn't really do anything in the first film. But that's the disappointing part about it. And that's why I'm like, you got to bring back Reagan or you got to bring back Chris McNeil, because they didn't do anything in this. They didn't really serve a purpose other than fan service. And fan service with no purpose doesn't appease me. Like, was I happy to see Ellen Burstyn back? Sure. Did I love that moment where she reconnected with Linda Blair and we see Linda Blair? Oh, I loved it. I did. I loved that moment. But that's just me as a fan of The Exorcist. It had nothing to do with the actual movie. You could have done that.
Didn't serve the story.
You got a Jimmy Fallon have him on his show and they show up and they haven't seen each other in years and they're like, oh, like that would have been the same thing. Like they didn't really serve a purpose. So that's kind of all I'm saying is, like, if you're going to do it in a sequel, I think Angela's still being possessed, and then if you're going to continue to call this an Exorcist sequel, make Reagan have a part and then move beyond that. Like, let her transition into just these characters, because they didn't do that in this movie. There was no purpose for Chris or Reagan being in this movie.
It makes me think about something now. And if there is indeed a trilogy, which it will be dependent on how successful this movie is, I do wonder if, like, listen, obviously at her age, they went, we need to get Ellen Burstyn into the first movie because the odds of her making it through a trilogy, are a little dicey. No disrespect. Ellen could easily live to 120 or outlive me. That's entirely possible. But it makes sense to go, we got to get her in right now. And what happens to her lures Reagan back into the world. Remember, she's been estranged from her mom this whole time. Well, now you reintroduce Reagan. You gave a reason for Reagan to come back. And then if you like what you're theorizing is that Angela is still indeed possessed. Well, now instead of the woman who was never even allowed in the room, now you have Reagan McNeil, the woman who actually had a demon inside of her, who has actually experienced it. That's a strong character to carry into 2 and 3, or even maybe just into 2. And 2 could be about Reagan going, I can promise you this chapter isn't done. So there's a way in there with Reagan, weirdly enough. Now that I'm seeing all the pieces laid out on the table, I could see Reagan actually being a very important part of parts 2 and 3.
Oh, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're going to introduce it, use it. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you're going to do it,
but I think maybe I could see now the mechanism of like we do need to get Ellen Burstyn in now, now. It's a little more urgent, so let's get her in now, and let's use her as the reason to bring Reagan back in. I think that can function.
And I agree with you. I just wish Chris had served a better purpose than just that. If that's the goal they're going for,
I do agree.
Fine, but yeah, make her serve a better purpose than her just getting stabbed in the eyes, and that's why Reagan comes back. Because again, even Reagan's return, while I do agree it's a conduit you could use, and I agree if you're going to do it, go that route. I totally agree with you. But the way they did it was just like, it just felt unearned. It just felt like there was.
It does feel unearned.
Yeah, it just felt no purpose. Because again, ultimately, Chris served no purpose in this movie. She was just there. And she got stabbed, and that was like the shock factor of, oh my gosh, Chris McNeil. As I said, my better version, not to say I'm a better writer than the people who did The Exorcist Believer, but my better idea would have been have her involved in the exorcism, and maybe she gets harmed there. Maybe she dies there, and that's why you get Reagan back, because she's like, my mother died during this exorcism. What happened? And then, she's back. Or what, you know what I mean? Like, it just felt like, oh, she shows up, she goes to this house, she gets stabbed, and that's it. And then we get this really heartfelt moment at the end with Reagan, and what purpose did they serve? That's all I'm saying.
Damon, before we move on to the next category, I want to add my special category, which you made me think of. Most disappointing reintroduction of a legacy character. And I'm going to give you 3 choices here.
All right.
Sally Hardesty in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Chris McNeil, Exorcist Believer, Reagan McNeil, Exorcist Believer.
Boy, you're really setting the bar for this one here, Patrick.
You must choose, Damon.
I'm gonna choose, and here's how I choose it. I'm gonna say of those 3, it's Chris McNeil, because the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake was god awful.
Tell us how you really feel.
So Sally Hardesty coming back in that movie it was really bad and made no point, but it just was a bad movie. The Exorcist Believer wasn't that. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. Even like me saying it's mediocre, that's actually kind of a compliment in a way. I know it sounds weird to say that, but it's actually like, when I say it's mediocre, when I say that, like, if it pops on HBO in 3 months, would I watch it again? Sure. That's far back. I have zero desire to ever revisit the Texas Chainsaw Massacre recent film. And Reagan, weirdly, Reagan coming back because her mother got hurt actually made sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's how families come together, is in a moment of tragedy or in a moment of need. Her mother got injured, and so she finally's like, I got to end this estrangement. I need to see my mom, because this may be the last time I see my mom. And so her coming back felt, okay, it's just the way she came, like the story of how she came back was kind of not Reagan, but Chris. Like Chris's being back made no sense. So yeah, Chris's is the one that's most disappointing because I was super excited about it, and she really had no part in this movie. She didn't serve a purpose in this movie. So yeah, she's the one for me.
I'm going to go with Sally Hardesty, and I'll tell you why. It's disappointing because
you love Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Well, I do very much so, and that character is my original final girl, like like she's the best, right? But here's the thing: giving Sally Hardesty a great reintroduction could have saved that movie. If you would have given her the Halloween 2018 treatment, that would have made it a good movie. That's why it's more disappointing. Because you're right. Exorcist Believer, pretty decent movie as it stands. Like, it didn't need Chris McNeil. That's kind of the weird part about it. Didn't need her. I think Texas Chainsaw needed Sally Hardesty and her story to cover up for whatever story it was that they decided for that to be, because it didn't work out too well. So I'm sticking to my guns and saying Sally Hardesty.
Yeah, how you graded it earlier, like when you said The Exorcist Believer is like a C+, I would probably give it a C. I know we don't do grades on this show, but like if I was
that's not us.
But a C is a passing grade. Like I said, like people say, oh, a C sounds bad. It's actually not. Like it's not. As I said, it's the first 40 minutes of this movie are really good, and then it kind of careens downward from there. There's nothing I liked about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot. Like there's literally nothing I liked about that.
Pretty
movie.
gory.
So, I mean, come on. I'm wearing a Terrifier 2 shirt. Like, come on, I can see gore anytime. Yeah, like it just that's why I said like that one. Yeah, I agree. And we actually said that during that podcast. We said if she had actually been like the Jamie Lee Curtis character and like they made her like into this grizzled badass who was dealing with trauma her entire life, she could have been a really compelling character. They didn't do any of that.
Nope.
But like I said, my point about the grading, if The Exorcist is a C, which again sounds bad to some people, doesn't really sound bad to me. Texas Chainsaw Massacre was an F- for me. Like that, you are not getting a passing grade for that movie.
Probably, I'd say it's a D- for me. F- is so that's we're getting into 30 miles from nowhere territory in the F- world. I could sit through Texas Chainsaw again. I can't sit through 30 miles.
Texas Chainsaw and Halloween Ends are the F- movies. Patrick, one of our favorite categories of the show, I always love this category, and this is a fun one, especially for a movie like this, which is, can we survive this horror movie? Now, this is an interesting one, because in this role, Patrick, you're the victor. You have kids. I do not have kids.
Yeah.
So you're kind of victor a little bit. Or maybe you're the Pentecostal dad. I don't know. Maybe secretly.
Nah, probably not.
maybe you're secretly going around holding snakes and chanting and speaking in tongues, and I just don't know about it. So, Patrick, if this is your children, are you surviving this horror movie?
Fuck no, Damon, I'm not. If I'm put in the scenario of Victor, which is a very different scenario than my current scenario, but with all of that on the line with your kids, I think my heart would just burst from the stress of it all. There's no chance. There's no chance, and there's no chance that I wouldn't be like. I wouldn't do what Father Karras did and just fucking take the demon from them and then get sucked into hell, which my hell would be 30 miles from nowhere. That's actually the direction that you take me to hell. So yeah, there's no chance for me in this scenario with me having to choose kids. Nah, couldn't do it. Dead on arrival.
I actually feel confident that I would survive, and here's why. And you're gonna laugh, and you're gonna be like, "God, you're a bad person. This is why you're not a parent." I'm not destined to be a parent, Patrick. Here's why. Because the scene you're talking about, the very dour scene where Victor goes and visits the mental ward where he's about to, basically take his daughter because he thinks something's seriously wrong with her and she's not getting better. Yeah, I would have put my daughter in there and been like, "Well, I'll see you in 6 weeks or whatever, kid. I'll be back to visit." And that would have been the end of it for me, because she would have been in the mental health place getting support there, never getting an exorcism. I would go that route. I would be like, "Well, we tried everything else, kid. I don't know what else to do for you. Here, you can have her here." And then people are like, "That's so mean. That's so heartless." I'm just taking the natural step he was about to take, like in the movie. Like I just would have been like, I got no other out here, and I don't believe in any of this. So I'm not calling
It
on the
made
Catholics.
sense.
Yeah, I'm not calling the Catholics. I'm not calling on the Pentecostals. I'm not calling the Baptists. I'm sorry. The natural next step would be admission into permanent care, and that's where she would end up. So by that regard, Patrick, I'd make it.
Oh, no, but see, Damon, I counter this because it would become a whole new movie. It'd become the Dream Warriors movie, but Dream like Exorcist Warriors movie, where an insane asylum would all of a sudden get overrun by possessions. That's what would happen in that movie. You just changed it to a new movie.
Well, by then I would have moved to a new town, far, far away, new address and new name. You would have never found me, Patrick. I'm just telling you right now. I joke about this all the time. We do the haunted house movies when I'm like, "Would you survive?" It's like, yeah, because I would have just got the fuck out. Like, I'm not sticking around. Like, you see blood,
Fuck off, everybody.
I'm out. Like, see ya. I'm the Eddie Murphy skit when he like the Eddie Murphy skit from the '80s where he's like, "Oh, this place is beautiful. You get out. Oh, too bad we can't stay, baby." That is like as soon as the kid is possessed and I know she's possessed. I'm like, does anyone want to adopt a kid? Because I'm done. Like, I'm good. I'm out. Like,
Yeah. Damon and kids, they don't mix.
they don't. So I'm saying, like, I'm being completely honest. I'm being, I'm just being brutally honest about this, Patrick.
Hey, that's what we need on this podcast. We like honesty here.
Well, that's what I said. You're a dad. You can relate better. I'm not.
Oh yeah.
I'm like sticker in that room, and yeah, I'll come visit in 6 weeks.
In 6 weeks, it is literally the asylum from Dream Warriors.
And anyone listening to this is probably like, that guy really doesn't need to have kids. You're right. I don't.
He won't.
I won't. Patrick, this next category is ranking the season of possession, and you mentioned this earlier, and we kind of didn't realize. Like, I didn't really realize this till you sent this category over. We've had a lot of possession films this year. We've had
Yes.
now we've had Exorcist Believer, we've had Talk to Me, we've had The Pope's Exorcist, and The Nun 2, and we've all reviewed these within the last 3 months, basically since July when we reviewed Talk to Me. So we're going to rank them 1 to 4. Now, there's a new movie coming out that we are going to eventually get to called When Evil Lurks. Is I'm getting that title right?
I believe that's what it's called, yeah.
I believe it's an Argentinian film. We talked about this earlier before recording the episode. Patrick and I are super excited to see it. We just haven't seen it yet. So we might have to redo these rankings when we see that, because that's also, from my understanding, a possession film. But based on the 4 possession films we've reviewed this year, new films, not The Exorcist.
Yeah.
Rank them 1 to 4. How do you rank these films?
I think at the bottom of my list has got to be The Nun 2. For reasons that we have a 2-hour podcast. If you can go listen back and find out why that hits the bottom of the barrel. My number 3 would be The Pope's Exorcist, which was a surprisingly good movie. So that's not even a bad ranking for me. It was a surprising different twist on exorcism, which we're looking for new ways in all the time. And shockingly, that would put Exorcist Believer at number 2, while it's certainly more middle of the road. It's certainly more expected. It's undeniable that, like, for instance, the kid possessed in Pope's Exorcist, I just never was buying that ever. I liked the buildup, even though it was a little bit jagged and crazy and kind of went from 0 to 60 a little too fast. Like, the execution of that was better than in the Pope's Exorcist. And there was, that movie relied on some grander, bigger themes, and I liked the themes in Exorcist Believer better, so that's why it outranked Pope's Exorcist for me. And number 1 is Talk to Me, and truth be told, I still haven't found a movie this year that is going to unseat Talk to Me from my number 1 horror movie of the year. We still got some movies to go. We don't know. But Talk to Me is just a killer movie and a very cool and new way into possession that looks nothing like anything else on the list. It does it completely differently, and it does it in a cool new way. So yeah, Talk to Me, I think, is my number 1.
So to your shock and surprise, Patrick, I have the exact same rankings.
Cheers.
The Nun 2, Pope's Exorcist, Exorcist Believer, and Talk to Me. Now, to be fair, if I'm being honest here, the gap between number 1 and number 2 is really wide.
It's pretty big.
Talk to Me might be right now my favorite film of the year right now. Not just horror film right now. Now, I have to be honest, 2 weeks from now, Martin Scorsese, Killers of the Flower Moon is coming out. Unless that movie's god awful, and I've read the book, I love the book. I have a feeling that's probably going to end up being my number one film of the year because I love Scorsese, I love DiCaprio, and I love that book. So, just spoilers on full film of the year, but nothing has top talk to me as far as horror films this year. It's not even it's number one.
Yeah.
I rewatched it again the other night. It's amazing. So the gap between 1 and 2 here is pretty wide, if I'm being honest. But that being said, I'm with you. Like, weirdly, you may not have expected that. You may have thought I was going to put Pope's Exorcist in number 2. I didn't mind the Pope's Exorcist. There are certain things I bump up against in that movie a little bit more than others. Particularly, I would say,
Buongiorno.
oh
Grazie.
yeah.
Gorlami? Lo pronuncio correttamente?
Sì, corretto. Gorlami. Gorlami.
You may be thinking to yourself, that sounds like Brad Pitt from Inglourious Bastards. Actually, it's Russell Crowe from the Pope.
I push back. He sounds fine in that movie. His accent's totally fine.
Does not. That movie went a little too far into like kind of like the cheesiness of it and a little over the top of the effects. So that's kind of where I put it at 3. And even though I bump up against a lot of what happened in the Exorcist Believer, as I said, the first 40 minutes are great. I love that. I love the premise. It's just the execution of the second half is where it kind of falls apart. So I'd actually put that same ranking, 1 to 4. I got to be honest. 1 to 2 is really wide, is all I'm saying. Like 1 to 2 in this ranking is really big.
Yeah, it's kind of Talk to Me's year. I'm very curious to see if something can unseat it. I don't know. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough to see if something beats that this year.
And you know what's great about that? I root for films to do that. Like I want to find a film that could do that. You know, like last year, was it last year? Yeah, last year I had Fresh, which came out I think in like February. And I said right then, I was like, that's going to be one that's going to be at the end of the year. And I kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And, Speak No Evil got real near it for me. But then at the end, I ended up going with Fresh as my favorite horror film of the year. But that's February at the end of the year. That's a long road to travel to get there. Talk to Me's number 1. I'm curious if there's anything left this year that could do it, but I root for it. Not because because I don't want to like Talk to Me. I love Talk to Me, but I would root for like if there's something better than Talk to Me. Holy shit, we had a really good year in horror.
Yeah. If something unseats Talk to Me, it's a special movie. So, but there's still time, and there's a lot of movies still coming out. Believe it or not, they're starting to pour out right now. So, we'll see. I'm very excited about this year's best of.
I know it's not going to top talk. I'm just telling you, I know it's not going to talk, but I'm so excited for Thanksgiving coming out in November.
I am excited.
That looks like such a great like 80s, 90s slasher. I'm so happy. I'm so excited for that movie.
I'm totally excited for that. I'm very excited to see how that one plays out. Yeah, and there's still plenty to lick our chops over this year.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last category as always, Patrick. Is it scary? So, Patrick, at the end of the day, The Exorcist Believer, is it scary?
There is very much an element of dread in this movie. I'm not gonna try and sink this movie that way, and I think that's ultimately why I think it gets a C+ on top of the fit and finish and the acting and all that stuff. Is that there is a sense of dread in this movie, but it's not the kind of dread that like cuts you to your core. It's just sort of it's C+ dread. It's the dread I expect. The minimum dread that I expect is there. So is it scary? No, I'm not. And definitely, I know it doesn't scare you. I know this because we know who we are. But there is an element of dread in this movie. It's just not. It's not anchored by a really great. How do I put it? It's not anchored by stakes that, to me, put me on the edge of my seat. I was on the edge of my seat for Saw X. I was not on the edge of my seat for this movie. And I would say Saw X is not as well made as this. But that's just how scary works to me. Can you put me into high gear? This movie didn't put me into high gear. It put me into low gear.
Yeah,
neutral.
I'm gonna go on the other side and say it's not scary. And the reason I say that emphatically is because when I left the theater tonight with my girlfriend, who is, you and I, you judge by your wife, I judge by my girlfriend. Like when they get scared, we kind of like, okay, this movie must be pretty scary because we're sick, twisted people. We don't get scared by anything, so we always have to grade on a scale for us. But I love when we get a chance to watch films with our significant others because they are the average moviegoer. Your wife gets terrified, my girlfriend gets terrified. When we left the movie theater, my girlfriend had the exact same reaction. She's like, it was all right. And she's like, it wasn't scary at all. It was like her literally what she said. And I've watched possession films with her before where she was like terrified. So when she said that, I was like, yeah, because I had that feeling, but I was like, well, maybe I'm judging a little harshly. When she said that and like unprovoked, she's just like, yeah, it just wasn't scary. And I was like, all right, I'm right about this. So no, it's not. But again, I keep saying this because people are like, you're judging, you're a David Gordon Green hater. I will say, if I ever meet David Gordon Green, it's going to be a really interesting conversation we're going to have. But that being said, I'm not judging this based on his direction or anything like that. Like in all honesty, like I'm joking about it, but in all seriousness, it didn't. There's good elements of this movie. It's not the setup is great. The performances are great. The direction isn't bad. None of that's bad. But there just wasn't, to me, there wasn't that sense of dread. There wasn't that sense of like shock and awe. There wasn't that sense of a stunning conclusion. None of that really hit me with this movie. And that's what I'm in a possession movie. That's what I want. I had it with Talk to Me is not the movie that made me jump out of my seat, but it's a dreadful movie. It's a movie that sticks with you. You'll think about that movie days later. The Pope's Exorcist wasn't really that scary either, but there were moments of scary in that. There were moments of dread in that movie that were actually really well done. This one just doesn't quite accomplish that in that particular way. Now, it's still a better movie. You know what I mean? It's a better movie, better film, but it's just not really scary to me. It didn't hit me, and especially, as I said, my biggest thing I bump up against in this movie, beyond the whole Chris McNeil of it all, is that the exorcism part wasn't scary. It didn't feel the way I wasn't hanging on a thread. I wasn't walking a tight wire during that exorcism, like what's going to happen. And I need that for this kind of movie, and I just didn't feel it.
Yeah, it's a totally fair assessment. I mean, like I said, there's dread on a thematic level, but it doesn't get you in your bones, Damon. And you and I, we're mining deep, we're fracking for that real dread, and this movie didn't deliver that.
Yeah, so now that's The Exorcist Believer. Real quick before we get out of here, I want to say we still have a lot of more horror movies coming up this month. Of course, a lot in October. Five Nights at Freddy's is coming up this month. Totally Killer, which is a new film that just dropped on Amazon Prime, literally the same day as The Exorcist Believer. So that's out there. Other horror movies that we're going to get into this month. But can I go ahead and tell what we're going to do? No, actually, I'm not going to tell. Tell what we're doing next week, Patrick. Because in truth be told, if not for the scariest person of all, which is Taylor Swift, we would actually be reviewing this film because this film was supposed to open on Friday the 13th. We get a Friday the 13th in October, which is a special occasion because that doesn't always happen. We get it this year, and they moved The Exorcist Believer to avoid Taylor Swift. But we do have a special surprise. Patrick, would you like to tell what our special surprise is for Friday the 13th?
Damon, as is tradition on this show, as best to our abilities, whenever there is a Friday the 13th, we try to talk about the Friday the 13th franchise best as we can. Well, this is October's Friday the 13th. It's a very, very special one. So indeed, on Damon's urging and my acquiescing, we are going to talk about Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. My favorite Friday the 13th movie of all time, because we may never get another Friday the 13th on October. So we got to go big. We got to go with the one that's my absolute favorite. I did a lot of research for it. I actually, there's a mountain of categories coming, and it's going to be a special double week. You're going to get Exorcist Believer, which you're listening to now, Friday the 13th. You're going to get a Friday the 13th episode.
Yeah, so there you go. So Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, coming in a matter of days. So stay tuned for that, for a special episode as we kind of really gear up for October. As always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes into the show each and every week. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on our YouTube channel. And if you look for us anywhere, just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You'll find us out there. You can also find us on social media. We have Twitter, or X, or whatever the hell it's called now. We have Facebook, and we have Instagram. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead, and you'll find us there. And you can also send us questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review. We love hearing from you guys, so please send us those messages on there as well. You can also send us emails if you prefer that method. That is rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rot. livingdead@gmail.com. And you can also find us on our own personal social media channels on both Instagram and Twitter. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes into the show each and every week. We'll be back in a matter of days as we dive into Patrick's favorite Friday the 13th movie on Friday the 13th. Until then, thanks for tuning in to Rewind of the Living Dead. We'll see you in a few days. See you then.
Peace.